Good morning. Welcome to our historical weapons program for this September. We are starting out on a new study of the Tai Chi Yang style saber set. For people who have done a bit of saber in the past, you can see lots of crossovers. The weapon is used very similarly. If you've done some of the butterfly swords or all the things, what you're going to see is that we're going to be coming back to a lot of common themes. If you're just getting started with the idea of working with weapons in our program, you'll see that what we're going to do is we're going to break down how to use the weapon in terms of its cuts, its deflections. We're going to do that in both arms a little bit, because one of the ways that we approach our historical weapons program is a bit of a light weights program as well, where you're kind of working with the weapon in both hands, a little bit of weight in the arms. So it gives a bit of fitness aspect to it, as well as kind of left-right hemisphere work, trying to get that non-dominant hand working. Sometimes helps with the work that goes on the dominant hand as well. So let's get ourselves started. We'll always do a little quick warm-up to get everything going. So just let your head rise and fall. And looking from side to side. And ear from shoulder to shoulder. And a couple of half circles in the front. Good. Shoulders are going to go back. And shoulders can go forward. It's going to be a fair amount of work on those arms. Let's get those shoulders warmed up a bit more. Circle one way. And the other. And we'll reach and stretch to one side. And we'll reach and stretch to the other. Let's get the spine warmed up a little bit. Let those arms go loose and wrap around the body. Good. Any kind of weapons work puts a bit of load on our shoulders, so let's give them a warm up. So we'll stretch on one side and across on the other. And we'll come up over the head and pull on one side and on the other. Then we're going to go behind the back and pull. And same on the other side. Good. We'll shake out those arms a little bit. Oh, here's a good warm up. Palms up, and over the head. Circling the wrists one way. Circling the wrists the other way. Stretch the fingers and pull on the wrist on one side and on the other. And then what you're going to do is you're going to grab your wrist and you're going to push in on the knuckles a little. One side and on the other. A little bit of warm up for the hips, and then we'll get rolling here. So circling from inside to outside. And from outside to inside. Good, and we'll shake it out. Okay, so what are we going to be working on? We're working on the saber. There are different types of sabers in the Chinese martial arts world. This one's called a goose quill, and it is kind of connected most directly to the Yang family. They sort of went in this direction of a sort of lighter, thinner saber. We also have, and I'll bring them out at different times and show you, one of the ones we see most classically in Kung Fu is the civilian version of the saber called the oxtail, that has sort of a heavy set end to it. And then there is a military version called the willow leaf that kind of is in between, a little heavier than the goose quill, not as heavy as the oxtail. But I'm going to work with my Yang saber because I don't get a chance to work with it all that often, and I'm teaching a Yang form. So what kind of things are we looking at when we're working with the weapon to get started? We've got a single-edged weapon, and we have a curved blade. So we've got a spine that we're going to be using to press and push and manipulate with the body. So one of the things that Saber can do is allow us to be, unlike sort of a longer double-edged sword that is out a little bit more for piercing and things of that sort, like we did when we did the double-edged sword for the Tai Chi in one of our previous lessons. This one allows us to get closer to the body. So there's going to be times we're kind of wrapping it and moving it around the body a lot, and that's what that spine allows us to do, is contact the blade and pressure and use work from our non-sword bearing arm to support and work with the sword itself. So what we're going to start with, like I do with most of the work in weapons, is some of the basic foundations of how the weapon works. And we'll also look at them, as we keep going, from the perspective of that Tai Chi Yang Saber set that we're working on. Now you'll see what I'm doing when I'm talking is I'm cradling the saber in my opposite arm. So traditionally, when you are not using the weapon, you are going to rest the spine in the crook of your elbow, and you're going to cradle the handle. And this is actually how the set's going to start, is by having this sword here. It's also just a good way to kind of keep the sword from poking other people or other things in the room when you're walking around and doing things without having the sword in your sword wielding arm. Is a good position to be able to have that. And like I say, our set's going to start here. So one of the things we're going to start with is in this cradled position. One of the techniques that is taught to us is how to make circles with the sword rested in that arm. So we're going to start with a downwards, down, out, up, in. And so we kind of get this reaching and pulling kind of motion, reaching and pulling. Now, if you want to sort of balance it out on both sides of the body, you can kind of work both arms together, and you want that nice rested feel. Now, if you're starting this program using like a piece of doweling or a broom handle cut down to size, one of the things you might want to do is draw a line on your dowel so you know what side of your dowel is going to be your edge. So when we're talking about edge directions and things of that sort, you've got a reference point. Okay, let's circle it the other way. So we're going to come up the center and kind of billow out. So we're kind of rolling here. We're going to see this happening in different ways inside the set as well. And we really want this nice feeling of supporting the sword. So if you've done other work in Tai Chi with the ideas of rest and support, we're kind of supporting the sword as we open and shift with it a little. So up and out and out. So we want to be able to get that circling one way. We want to get this to be able to circle the other way, and we want to be comfortable with it rested in that arm. So there's times when it's rested in that arm, we're going to think about using the pommel for punching and striking. Sometimes the idea is if you've got a scabbard that you would then draw the weapon, so you could pick it up. So what we want to do here is we want to think about how to pick this up. And we're going to see this repeated in the set. So this is a hand position to pay some attention to because it's going to come back to us several times in the set. So we're going to come kind of up. We're going to sort of sandwich the handle, and then we're going to release. So now we've still got this connected pivot point, but we now have our sword in our hand. Now, what are we looking for? Quite often, you want to have a wrap of your hand when you're holding. So sometimes we can get into a position where we're kind of pinching with our fingers and things of that sort, and we want to avoid that kind of pinching in the fingers because it's easy for the sword to be removed. And quite often we're going to reference our middle finger so that we can get this sense of pulling with the bottom fingers for reaching out with chops and pulling with our index finger to come back. So we want to have this kind of nice ability to push and pull, and we want to have, just like a gymnast holding onto the bars and things like that, you need that wrap, because one of the things that somebody wants to do in terms of when we look classically at wielding a weapon is that if I can remove the weapon from your hand, it is no longer a threat to me. So if my grip is not effective, then my weapon gets removed from me a lot easier. Now, what do we want to do? We don't want to choke ourselves, choke the weapon off. So we're not going to be so tight in the wrist that we can't do much with it. We want to have some looseness, but we want to have some control with that weapon as well. Now, one of the big things we're going to talk about is when we get to the various ideas, we're going to have cuts and slicing and slashing, because a single-edged weapon is very much built towards the idea of slashing. With the oxtail, with the bigger, heavier end, you'll see a lot more work, and we'll see it in here too, of chopping, where a slice is going to come through, a chop is going to return. So we'll have cuts, we'll have chops, we'll have thrusts. And so thrusts are when we're talking about using the tip of the weapon for piercing motions. So we'll have piercing motions in our thrusts, we'll have cutting motions, slicing, slashing motions, and we'll have chopping motions as three of our main kind of things that we're doing. Now, the difference between a percussive weapon and an edged weapon is that one has an edge. Things we have to keep in mind if we're talking about an edged weapon is that swords don't like being struck heavily on the sides of them, because that's not where their strength is. Their strength is on the spine, their strength is on the edge. And so when we are thinking about doing our cuts and our chops, we're going to have to really focus on what I'm going to keep referring to as edge alignment. So you want your knuckles, and you want to be able to reference where the edge is of your sword, so you're not rolling your wrist as you're striking. And that's hard to do. Sometimes, we want to make a big swing and we end up slapping with the side of the blade. That's sort of dramatic, but we might also start scalloping one way or the other way, and then your blade deflects or it doesn't cut. Now, the other thing about cuts is that they are pulled, that there is friction and drawing to make a cut. If you think about, if you're, not for our vegetarians out there, but if, you've got a piece of steak and you just take a knife and you push it against that, we're not going to be very successful with cutting that steak. It is the same with a weapon. So you're going to see a lot of the time when we're working on this that we want to touch and get a feeling of drawing the blade across something, touching and drawing. So we're not just looking at a percussive hit. The chops are a bit more percussive, boom, but cuts and slashes, we're going to want that, they call it drawing with the blade. You want to think about movement and pulling and drawing a lot with your blade. So we're going to keep discussing that as we get going as well. Okay, so I know you got here, you want to jump in, you want to work with your swords. So let's start out. And what we're going to do with each class is, as part of the physical training of the program, of the strength training, of using historical weapons is a much more interesting thing than light dumbbell work. We're going to do cuts and techniques in both hands as a warm-up at the beginning of every class. We're probably going to do 50 or more cuts an arm to get ourselves strengthened, to get used to the weapon. So let's start with our dominant arm, and let's talk about our major cut directions. So quite often we hear in the martial arts about the 8 directions, the bagua. Cuts are along those lines as well. So what we're going to start out with is we're going to start out with downwards diagonal cutting. So you can put one leg forward. I would say put the leg forward of the arm that is not holding the weapon. We'll talk about as we get going how we need to make sure that we don't lose track of our non-weapon bearing arm, because in a conflict with edged weapons, you will lose that hand quickly if you forget where it is. For today, though, we're going to put one foot forward, we're going to put one foot back, and what we want to do is we want to think about when we're using the weapon, we want to think about, like all Tai Chi, we're doing a Tai Chi set. The ground is what's building up the power structures and the whipping motion in the body. Tension is going to get in the way of the connection between your center and ground and the weapon. So we want to be loose, we want our shoulders down, and we always want to think about starting with the handle and then pulling the cut. Now here's where we've got to think about that edge angle. As I cut down on my diagonal, I want to have a nice edge angle. As we pass through center, part of a weapon's work is recovering after the cut. We don't want to have a heavy weapon and go slice and kind of lose our balance. We don't want that to go swinging way back here and leaving ourselves fully exposed. So as we cut through the center, we're going to roll through our wrist, bring this up to the opposite shoulder, and we're going to cut back on that diagonal. So I'm going to go diagonal. We're going to talk about these wrist rolls in more detail soon. So today, let's just get a feel for these downwards diagonals. So we're going to open this up. We're going to raise it up towards our shoulder. We're going to cut through. As we cut through and we get our edge angles, we're going to roll over our wrist, bring this up, and we're going to cut back the other way. So let's try 10 of those, 10 in each direction of our downwards diagonal. So we're going to go 1, 2. And you can think about kind of getting your weight shifting 1, 2, 1, 2. That's it. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Last ones for now, 10. Good. Okay, now you're going to learn to dread me saying this when we're working. Non-dominant arm. So we're going to put the sword on the other side. That means we're going to go with our other leg forward for now. So that same feeling, rested on the shoulder, cut through that diagonal, roll it over, bring it up, cut through. As that passes, we recover and come back. We don't want to stop the weapon. We want to use the momentum of the weapon, and that's why we stay loose in our wrist. So downwards diagonals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Okay, let's go back to our dominant arm. And if we can do downwards diagonals, well, then we also want to learn how to do rising diagonals. So in this case, we're going to be cutting from our hip up to our shoulder. So here's our pull. We touch and pull. We recover by letting it settle down. And then we're going to rise and cut and pull on the other side. So we're going to have this nice arc. We're cutting. If you imagine you had a marker on the end of your sword, you'd be drawing a big X with it kind of the X, around the center point, the crossing of that X around the center point of your body. So we're going to come up, and then we're going to come up on the other side. So we're going to go 1, recover, 2, cut, recover, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, things to keep in mind. We want to cut things out here. We're looking for range and reach. Fighting is always a range game. So when we're doing these exercises, we're looking for this nice sort of maximum range. We want to be out in front of us. What sometimes happens when people are working on their diagonals is they start sort of sweeping the floor, and they're not actually ranging out in front of them. So we want to think of reach out. So let's go to that. Here it goes. Non-dominant arm to make everything feel so comfortable. So we're going to cut. We want to range. We want to reach out, and then we want to pull from our core. We want to pull the handle back. We're going to rest the sword down so it's got a bit of a balance point. We'll talk more about that as we get going. And then we're going to turn and cut up the other way. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Okay, getting those arms worked over. So if we've got downwards diagonals, and that's our first kind of 4 corners of our 8, now let's look at horizontal. So in the horizontal, one of the things we're going to have to think about here again is our edge. Are we scalloping up or down? If something connects with that, is it going to deflect or is it going to cut? And this is where, if you've been doing Tai Chi for a while and you've learned about closing the body and opening the body, there's a lot of that that goes on in our horizontal. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from outside. We're going to cut across. As the sword passes, we want that recovery. So we're going to flip it over and turn the edge out. And we're going to come back the other way. Now, what I'm going to get you to do coming back the other way, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, where we're going to start to engage with the spine of the weapon, is you're going to kind of push that out. We're going to turn over the wrist. That's why we did those wrist warm-ups. We're going to close. We're going to let the blade follow through. We're going to turn over and we're going to push back. Now, again, you can be rocking your weight when you're doing this, but again, you want to think of outwards. I call it sword presence, the ability to have pressure out of the tip and the edge, and you're pushing. You've got to push with the wrist and with the forearm to push that edge to make it draw across. So let's try our 10 horizontals from our dominant arm. So we're going to come from the outside, 1, turn it back over, come back 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Non-dominant arm. I told you you're not going to like it when I keep saying that. So, like before, I'm going to turn that over. I'm thinking of pushing through and cutting. My arms are coming together, so I'm helping to brace this cut. I'm going to turn over, and I want to kind of be able to rest this on my arm a bit, and I want to push out to come back. So we're going 1 and 2. So let's do 10 on each of those cuts. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is when you find out if you're going to clear off everything on the tables in your house. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I feel awkward with that other arm, but we want to do the same strengthening to keep the body balanced, because if you only do all your sword stuff in one side, you end up with one arm really strong and the other arm hasn't gotten worked over at all. Okay, so that gives us our horizontals. So we've got diagonals now, it's falling and rising, and we have our horizontals. Now, the horizontals we can think of at multiple levels. So sometimes our horizontal is going to be at throat level, because that's one of the places we're going to cut. Sometimes that horizontal will be along in the abdominal level. And sometimes we'll see this lower, where we're attacking the femoral arteries and things inside of the legs and cutting at the legs as well. So you can practice that at different at different heights. Okay, time is disappearing in our first lesson, but that's okay. We're just getting a feel for the weapon. So let's work on 2 downwards vertical techniques. So the first one's going to be on the sword wielding side. So now we're going to make a cut and pull. Again, you see that arc that my blade's going through. I'm not snapping. That's going to be our chops. I'm cutting and pulling through. Again, I need a recovery. So I roll over my wrist. I pick up a little bit like I did with the diagonals, but instead of hitting that diagonal, I'm going to be coming down and I'm going to be cutting downwards with this. So we're going to roll back and cut down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here it goes, non-dominant arm. So we're rolling back, we're opening. We'll talk a bit more about these wrist rolls as we get going. So we're going to roll back, we're going to cut down. 1, 2, 3. So we're cutting down on that vertical. 4, 5. We're going to separate somebody's shoulder from their body. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. We're going to do one more today. We'll just stay with the downwards. So that was all from the sword wielding side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come around the body and we're going to cut down from across the body. So I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to chop down and bring it back to the non-sword side. So I'm going to cut down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Non-dominant arm. 1 across the body. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. Let's leave it there. We're getting to know our weapon a little bit. We're going to talk about all our wrist rotations. We've got chops, we've got thrusts, we've got parries and deflections to look at, as well as we'll start to build up and use sections of the form to learn about these cuts and eventually start to sequence them into the form as well. So as a quick review with our dominant arm for today, we had the idea of edge angle. We had the idea of pulling our cuts, of reaching, but also of recovering so that the weight doesn't control us. We don't want to, we want to finish the hit. We really want to get that nice full arc, but then we're going to control it. And we practiced downwards diagonals. We practiced rising diagonals. We practiced horizontals. We practiced verticals on the sword side and verticals on the non-sword side in the downwards direction. And we're going to have to leave it there for today. So thanks for joining in our first lesson. We're going to build up nice and incrementally and then start to introduce the flavor of the Tai Chi set and the nature of how they use the saber, as well as working on the sequence of the Yang style single-edged sword form. Thanks for training today. I'll talk to you very soon. Always, if you have questions after class and you're here live, we can take them live. If you're catching it from the archive, you can always send me texts or emails about questions you have, and I will bring it into the next lesson for you. Thanks for training today. We'll talk to you soon.